Chronigma.
Learner, welcome back to the deep dive. The sources you send over this time, they've really piqued our curiosity. We're diving into some historical accounts, some encyclopedic entries, all about, well, let's be honest, one of the most baffling discoveries in archaeological history, the Antikythera Mechanism. But I think what's really intriguing about this deep dive is that it's not just about rehashing history, right? It's more like putting on our investigator hats, our researcher hats, and asking, how would you even begin to unravel something this old, this intricate? I mean, how do you approach an artifact that, on the surface, shouldn't even exist?
I think that's a brilliant way to approach this. It really gets at the heart of what makes this discovery so compelling, even today. Just imagine, right? You're confronted with an object that completely upends your understanding of the past. Where would you even start?
Well, if I were in the shoes of those early investigators, back in the day, my starting point would have to be that moment of discovery. It's 1901, where the Aegean Sea, off the coast of Antikythera. Now picture this, sponge divers, not archaeologists, not historians, but everyday people just searching the seabed for sponges. And they stumble upon a shipwreck, a Roman-era shipwreck, by the way. Now at first they're probably focused on what they recognize, the obvious treasures, statues, pottery, things like that. But then among this haul, there's this lump, this corroded, seemingly insignificant piece of bronze and wood. I mean, could they have possibly grasped the magnitude of what they were holding?
It's highly unlikely. To them, it probably looked like just another piece of debris from a centuries-old wreck, right? Nothing special. I mean, it wasn't gleaming gold or a perfectly preserved amphora. It would have just blended right in. It took a very specific kind of eye, a curious mind, to see beyond that unremarkable exterior.
And that's where Valerius Stace comes in 1902. He's an archaeologist, and he's meticulously examining the finds from the shipwreck. And then, this is where it gets crazy, he spots it. A gear. A finely crafted gear embedded within this ancient lump. Can you imagine? Put yourself in his position. What's your first thought? An astronomical clock, maybe? That's what the sources suggest was the initial idea. But then, wouldn't a wave of doubt, of skepticism wash over you? I mean, a gear in a shipwreck that's over 2,000 years old, was that even technologically possible back then?
Precisely. The prevailing understanding of ancient technology, it just didn't encompass this kind of intricate mechanics. It would have been seen as an anomaly, something that completely contradicted the accepted timeline. So the initial reaction, as you said, it probably would have been disbelief, maybe even dismissal. Maybe someone thought, oh, this must be something from a later era that somehow got mixed in with the older artifacts.
Right. But that gear, it was there. It couldn't be ignored. And so as research continued over the following century, what they gradually uncovered was, well, mind-blowing, to put it mildly. This lump with a gear, it wasn't just any old mechanism. It's now recognized as the world's first analog computer. Let that sink in for a moment. An analog computer dating back to, get this, the late 2nd or early 1st century BCE. That's somewhere between 260 BCE, according to the sources, and some even argue for an even earlier date. And the shipwreck itself, it's from around 70 to 60 BCE. We're talking about an artifact that predates so much of what we thought we knew about the technological capabilities of the ancient world. So the big question becomes, what was its purpose? What was this ancient computer actually calculating?
The sources are pretty clear about its primary function, tracking the movements of the cosmos. It was designed to calculate the positions of the sun, the moon, the planets. But it wasn't just a passive display. It could actually predict eclipses, solar eclipses, lunar eclipses. That indicates a really deep understanding of long-term astronomical cycles. And what's even more fascinating, perhaps, is that it also tracked the 4-year cycle of athletic games in ancient Greece, sort of like our modern-day Olympics. And get this, the sources specifically mention the Haliade and the Nothma Games of Dodona, which is in Epirus. So that might give us some clues about where this mechanism was made or who it was made for. And the speculation doesn't stop there. Some researchers believe it might have even tracked other celestial events and different calendars.
Which makes that initial skepticism from those early scholars completely understandable. I mean, even though history has shown they were wrong, the sheer scope of its functions, the fact that it could calculate planetary movements, predict eclipses, track calendars, and even games, all with this level of complexity, it just didn't fit with the prevailing historical narrative. It really did seem prochronistic, like you said, like it was out of its time. So as a researcher, you'd naturally want to delve deeper into the object itself. Who were the individuals, the brilliant minds, who dedicated themselves to unlocking its secrets?
This is where the investigative work becomes truly captivating. You start by meticulously documenting every single aspect of the existing fragments. That's what the German philologist Albert Rehm did back in the early 20th century. He was the first to suggest that it might be an astronomical calculator. But to really understand it, you'd need a way to see inside the artifact without causing any damage. And that's where Derek J. DeSilla Price comes in. He was a British science historian, and starting in 1951, he pioneered the use of X-ray and gamma-ray imaging to peer into the heart of this ancient mechanism. He even collaborated with a Greek nuclear physicist, Charalampos Karakalos. Imagine the excitement when those first grainy images revealed the intricate network of gears hidden within. Price published his findings in 1974, and that was a pivotal moment. It provided the first real glimpse into just how complex this mechanism truly was.
It's like an archaeological detective story, right? Unfolding clue by clue, piece by painstaking piece. And the story continues into the present day with the University College London Antikythera research team, led by Tony Freth. They've taken the investigation to a whole new level with even more advanced imaging techniques like X-ray tomography and high-resolution scanning. And the incredible thing about these methods is that they're non-invasive. So they can essentially peel away layers of corrosion virtually and reveal details that would be invisible to the naked eye. Hidden gears, inscriptions etched into the metal. I mean, as a researcher, having access to that kind of detail would be revolutionary.
Oh, absolutely. The level of detail they've been able to capture is just phenomenal. It's like having a window into the minds of the ancient engineers who designed and built this device. Now, you have to remember, the mechanism wasn't found intact. It was originally a single concreted mass, but it's since fragmented into 3 main pieces and then further into a staggering 82 fragments. Each one of those fragments is like a piece of a puzzle, and together they're helping us slowly reconstruct this incredible machine. Fragment A, which is the largest, contains the main gear, a massive gear, about 13 centimeters in diameter with 223 teeth, and it also has the socket for the hand crank. Fragments B and C, they have significant portions of the metonic spiral and the front dial, including the moon indicator. And then you've got the smaller fragments, each one potentially holding vital clues. Fragment D, which some believe might be related to planetary gears, specifically for Jupiter, and fragments containing inscriptions from the Saros spiral and remnants of the wooden box that once housed this whole marvel.
So imagine you're a researcher, right? You're examining these fragments or looking at these incredible images. The next question that would naturally arise is, how did it actually work? How did all these gears and dials, how did they come together to perform such complex calculations?
The fundamental principle is surprisingly simple. A hand crank. Turning this crank would set in motion a whole system of interlocking bronze gears. Each gear was precisely cut with a specific number of teeth, and they were all designed to interact with each other in very specific ways. So by setting a date on the front dial, you'd essentially be inputting information into the system, and then the gears would rotate in very predictable ratios, translating that input into a dynamic display of astronomical information. It was a mechanical representation of the heavens, if you will.
Okay, so let's zoom in on those dials for a moment. On the front face of the mechanism, you had a fixed outer ring. This ring represented the ecliptic, which is the path the sun appears to take across the sky, and was marked with the familiar zodiac constellations. Inside that fixed ring, there was a rotating ring that showed the Sothic Egyptian calendar. Now, what's interesting here is that initially, scholars thought this was a solar calendar, a 365-day calendar. But more recent research suggests that there are some inconsistencies, some intervals, that point to a lunar influence. So it might have actually been a lunar calendar or maybe even a combination of both. But regardless, by aligning these rings, the user could set a specific point in time. And then there were pointers that would indicate the positions of the sun and the moon. And what's really ingenious here is that the moon pointer incorporated epicyclic gearing. That means you have a gear moving around another gear. And this was used to approximate the moon's irregular orbit, which is something that the ancient Greek astronomer Hipparchus was known to have studied extensively. There's even some tantalizing, though not yet definitively proven, evidence to suggest that there might have been pointers for the other 5 planets known at the time.
The fact that they used epicyclic gearing for the moon, that's just remarkable. It shows a really sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics. They didn't just want to show the moon's average position, they wanted to model its complex, irregular movements as accurately as possible. And if they did indeed have indicators for the other planets, well, that would just elevate the mechanism to an even higher level of complexity, suggesting that they had a very comprehensive model of the solar system as they understood it.
Now, if we flip this mechanism over and look at the back, we find these two large spiral dials, the Metonic dial and the Saros dial. What were these designed to track?
The Metonic dial, that was all about the Metonic cycle. It's a 19-year period where the lunar phases repeat on pretty much the same days of the solar year. So it's incredibly useful for aligning lunar calendars and solar calendars. And this dial has a spiral track with 235 divisions, which corresponds to the 235 months in the Metonic cycle. And what's cool is that it even has the names of the months written in the Corinthian style. So that suggests it might have been made in Corinth or maybe for someone who lived in a Corinthian colony. Now, the Saros dial, that one was all about eclipses. It tracked the Saros cycle, which is roughly an 18-year period after which solar and lunar eclipses repeat in a very similar pattern. Just imagine having a mechanical device that could tell you when these celestial events were going to happen.
And then there were those three smaller dials on the back, each one playing a role in this intricate web of astronomical knowledge.
You got it. There was the games dial, which tracked that 4-year athletic cycle, probably the Haliad games we talked about earlier. And then you had the Calyptic cycle dial, which is a 76-year cycle, essentially a refinement of the 19-year Metonic cycle. And then there was the Exoligmos dial, a 54-year cycle that was used to further refine eclipse prediction. And here's the kicker, right? On the back doors of the mechanism, they actually inscribed instructions of almost like a user manual etched into the bronze.
Right. These inscriptions, they're like a window into how this device was supposed to be used. They tell us about the cycles, the 76-year Calyptic cycle, the 19-year Metonic cycle, the 223 lunar months of the Saros cycle. They even specify the 235 subdivisions on the Metonic spiral. So this wasn't just a device, it came with an instruction manual. And this brings us to what your sources call, and it's a great term, inquietantes implicaciones, which means unsettling implications. Because the technology that we see in the Antikythera Mechanism, it doesn't reappear for another 1,400 years in Western Europe. What does that tell us?
It forces us to completely rethink what we thought we knew about ancient Greek technology. We've always known they were incredible thinkers, philosophers, mathematicians, but the Antikythera Mechanism proves that they were also masters of precision engineering. And not just simple engineering, but engineering at a level that we didn't think was possible for another 14 centuries. It suggests that there might be a whole lost history of technological innovation, a history far more advanced than we ever imagined. And when you consider the references we find in ancient literature, mentions of devices built by people like Archimedes and Posidonius, they take on a whole new meaning. Was the Antikythera Mechanism just a fluke, a one-off? Or was it part of a much larger tradition of technological advancement, a tradition that has since been lost to time?
But it's also important to remember that as researchers, we have to be objective. There are limitations to consider. As your sources point out, the Antikythera Mechanism was a hand-built device, so it likely suffered from mechanical inaccuracies. Imperfectly cut gears, they would have introduced friction, slippage, things that would have limited the precision of its calculations. And while their understanding of celestial mechanics was advanced, it wasn't perfect. So there would have been some inaccuracies in their planetary predictions, especially for the planets that were farther away from Earth.
You're absolutely right. While the conceptual brilliance of the Antikythera Mechanism is undeniable, we have to acknowledge the practical constraints of the technology available at the time. The manufacturing techniques would have placed limitations on its accuracy, and their astronomical models, while groundbreaking, were still evolving. It's also worth noting that the Antikythera Mechanism actually predates Ptolemy's more sophisticated astronomical models. So that tells us just how early this kind of ingenuity was emerging. And the research is still ongoing, by the way. New discoveries are being made all the time. For example, recent findings related to the cycles of Venus and Saturn, those are helping us to further refine our understanding of the mechanism's intended accuracy. They're even fueling new proposals for how it might have been reconstructed.
So, learner, as we bring all these pieces together, as we try to make sense of this ancient puzzle, what's the bigger picture? What does the Antikythera Mechanism tell us about our past?
In a nutshell, it forces us to rewrite the early chapters of the history of technology. It proves that the ancient Greeks were capable of incredibly complex, intricate engineering far beyond what we previously gave them credit for. It demonstrates a profound understanding of astronomy, mathematics, sophisticated concepts like epicyclic motion, and they didn't just understand these things theoretically, they were able to apply them in practical mechanical ways. And perhaps the most intriguing implication of all is that there might be a whole hidden history of similar technological achievements out there just waiting to be discovered. It suggests that the ancient world was far more dynamic and innovative than we often give it credit for.
And the fact that this knowledge, this level of technology, seemed to have vanished for centuries, well, that raises some really profound questions. It makes you think about the fragility of knowledge, about what causes technological regression, and just how much of our past might still be hidden, waiting to be rediscovered. It's a powerful reminder that our understanding of history is constantly evolving, constantly being challenged and reshaped.
I couldn't agree more. It's a true aha moment. It challenges the idea that technological progress is always linear, always moving forward. The Antikythera Mechanism proves that that's simply not true. It embodies a level of intellectual and mechanical sophistication that makes us question everything we thought we knew about the ancient world and opens up a world of possibilities.
So, learner, as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to ponder. Given the mind-boggling complexity of the Antikythera Mechanism, and considering those tantalizing hints from ancient texts about other similar devices, how many other incredible feats of engineering might still be out there, hidden beneath the waves or buried deep underground, just waiting to be unearthed and to rewrite history as we know it? What could those discoveries tell us about the cyclical nature of innovation, about the ebb and flow of knowledge across millennia? It's a thought that fills me with a sense of wonder and possibility. We encourage you to keep exploring, to do your own deep dive into this fascinating artifact, to look into the ongoing research, maybe even check out some virtual reconstructions. And until our next exploration, keep those curious minds engaged.